it's a privilege to be able to share with you. I've just finished writing a book, and by the way, this is not a plug for it, but someone put to me about a year ago that in view of my age, it might be good to get some things down in writing of my experiences and what have you of church leadership in over nearly 5 decades. In 1977, I became the full-time pastor, leader of what was then Biggin Baptist Church. In fact, I was the only full-time leader. The church was still quite small then, but one of the first things that I did was I asked the question, and I asked it of God, what sort of church do you really want here? I wanted to know what is a biblical, an authentic biblical New Testament expression of church. And I came to the conclusion that at the end of the day, God wants a functioning body. He wants people who each have a part to play, each one discovering their gifts, and basically where no one is more important than anyone else. And so I set about doing that. One of the things I realised as I read through the Gospels that Jesus chose a number of men, chose 12, but there were others that followed, and there was men and women there, and so there were many that were being discipled, but he chose 12 disciples who were going to be the first apostles, and he put them through a process of training. And in my book we spent quite a lot of chapters on how that actually took place. But the verse that really grabbed me from Luke's Gospel, chapter 6, verse 40, was a verse that is translated something like this: the servant is not above the master, or the student is not above his teacher, but everyone, that includes you and me, everyone when they have been fully trained will be like their teacher or their master. I guess that's very idealistic, but the fact that Jesus said it, we have to take it seriously. Paul took it seriously because we see him emulating Jesus's ways of discipleship himself. But I asked the question, what was Jesus actually saying in that sentence? Well, I think what he was saying is this: yes, I want you to be like me. But how? Because we don't take on deity, but we are partakers of the divine nature through the new birth. So we are being changed. So what was Jesus actually getting at? I think there were two things. I think the first thing was character, that we're to be his image bearers in the world. Therefore, his character is to rub off on us. And you see this in the life of Peter, the disciple. And we love Peter. We meet him in the Gospels. He's larger than life. He's walking on water. Then he's losing his faith and sinking. He's there confessing allegiance to Jesus in the garden. He's taken his sword, and yet a couple of hours later he's denied that he ever knew Jesus. He's an up and down sort of guy. But all through this process of 3 years, Jesus is putting things into this man's life through teaching, through example, through him accompanying Jesus on some very significant events. And this is all getting into him, and it's changing him, so that when we come to the time of Pentecost, it's Peter that stands up with the 11. So what has happened to Peter? His character is being changed, but also his gifting is coming out, because he was a born leader. But that gifting had to be sanctified. And we find now that he's using his leadership skill. In other words, he's come to that place of accepting his responsibility. I think sometimes we confuse responsibility with how we perform in church. So if we're up front, if we lead worship, if we can preach, if we can speak in tongues, interpret, if we can use spiritual gifts, if we lay hands on people and pray for them, if we're one of those sort of people think, oh, they're mature. Actually, that's not the maturity that Jesus is talking about here. In fact, all those things that I mentioned previously, actually you can't do at this moment, because physically we don't meet together to do those sort of things. Maturity is when you accept your God-given responsibilities, and we have to grow into that. So responsibilities as a father, as a husband or wife, responsibility as a son or daughter, of honouring parents, responsibility as an employer or maybe an employee. As we accept those responsibilities and fulfill them as to the Lord, that is a sign of our maturity. And so that was what Jesus was looking for as he got hold of these 12 disciples. And the discipleship program at times was a little bit painful for them, and they suffered a bit in it. And learning lessons sometimes is painful because we have to be corrected. And there'll be other times where we can go through some of the other ways in which Jesus trained these disciples. But, and there is a big but here, it's always to the end that they then train others. And so whatever gifting God has given you, your character as it's been developed, it is that you take responsibility now for others. You're not just there to be in your usual seat on Sunday morning, singing songs, perhaps sharing in a gift, listening to a sermon. You are there also to be giving away to others what Jesus has given to you through discipleship. And obviously that means there needs to be disciplers, those that train others, and we'll perhaps come to that at another time. Just want you to think about this. Did Jesus have an identity crisis? I don't think so. He knew who he was. He grew up learning who he was and what his vocation was, and ultimately the cross. It says just before the cross in John 13, it says Jesus knew where he'd come from and he knew where he was going. He never had an identity crisis. He was never insecure. But if we're honest, we are insecure at times. And we need to learn to handle our insecurities. I don't believe there's a charismatic wand you can wave over people and perhaps say a few words in tongues which will deal with it. There might be things that we can do, but by and large, we have to overcome. And one of the things we overcome is our insecurities, which is so important if we're going to disciple others, because we've got to believe we've got something worth giving away. I learned this lesson about being secure in my insecurities when I was lecturing some postgrad students on church history, the first 300 years. And I was sharing there about the intertestamental period and the Maccabee period, which is foundational to understanding the first 300 years of the early church, and particularly the time of the first apostles and Jesus. A hand went up and said, "Mr. Lowe, excuse me, have you read Dr. So-and-so's paper on this period?" And I said, "I don't know who Dr. So-and-so is." And he said, "Well, when I was at Cambridge, he was my tutor when I did my master's in theology at Cambridge." At that moment, you can imagine, I felt a little insecure. I'm doing the lecturing, this guy knows more than I do. So what did I do? I said to myself, "Ray Lowe, be secure in your insecurities." And then I invited him to take the lecture, and he did brilliantly. He knew far more than me on this introductory period. Later we had coffee together, and he said, "Ray, you can't teach me anything about church history, but you can teach me about life. You have experiences, you have stories, you have wisdom that I don't have yet, and I need that. Please, can I come and stay with you in your home, and so I can learn from you?" If I had not learned to be secure in my insecurities, I would have had to put that young man down. And I've seen guys, brilliant young guys, being put down when actually, if the guy that was responsible for them was able to deal with his insecurities and then say, maybe here is a young David that God has taken from the sheep pen, for which he's given me the responsibility to bring into a senior leadership role in the church. And I want to say to you, I've discipled many, many, many in my time. The thing that thrills me most is that I could give you a list of those that I've discipled who've gone way beyond where I've gone in God and are leading very significant situations around the world. So I want you to answer this question that I leave with you now. Are you being discipled? Have you been discipled? And if you have, are you passing it on, discipling others? And when you become insecure, what do? Do you get defensive? Do you react? Or do you speak to your own soul? Ray Lowe, be secure in your insecurities and just see what the fruit of that might be. I hope that's been helpful, and I hope I have other opportunities of sharing some of my thoughts and experiences with you. So have a great week. I think for you it's Thursday. No, for me it's Thursday. For you it's Friday. So have a good weekend. God bless you. Bye-bye now.